This is the Boundless Voyage titanium folding wood stove. If you're interested in hearing my thoughts on it, keep watching. Before we get started, I want to thank the company Temu for sending out the Boundless Voyage titanium folding wood stove so that I could share it with you. Now, the quick backstory is I have another stove from Temu that I reviewed a few months ago, and it was a titanium collapsible hot tent stove. And the backstory behind that was I had first became aware of Temu some months ago when they reached out to me and offered to send me things to review. At that time, I wasn't sure that I wanted to do that, so I put that off until I started looking for small wood stoves that I know people enjoy seeing. This is the stove I wanted from Temu at that time. However, it was not on their list of items that they would send out to reviewers, but they did offer me the hot tent stove, and I decided to take them up on that. Well, after that review came out, they reached out to me again and offered to send this stove to me. This is the one I wanted from the beginning, so now I have it to share it with you, because this is a stove that I've had a number of viewers ask me about over the last couple of years, and I wasn't sure that I wanted to purchase, but having it sent to me makes it something that at least now I have it and I can share it with you. So what I thought I would do is I'm going to collapse the stove down into its package that it arrived in so that I can assemble it for you, and at the same time go through a few specifications for it, show you the different ways that it can be used. Of course, I'm going to build a fire in it because I want to get my lunch on. All right, let's get started. All right, so this is the bag the stove arrives in. It's a Codura type material on the outside, Boundless Voyage label. Handle here, zipper here. It is kind of rubberized on the inside for waterproofness, sufficient to the task. So here's the first thing inside of the bag, and this is something I was not expecting. I hadn't seen anybody else show this. This is a carbon felt ground pad that you can put under the stove when you're a little concerned about the surface that you're going to be working on, whether it's combustible. Something I would use definitely in the summertime and into the fall underneath the stove out here in the woods, but anytime you could use it. Today we're not going to be, because again the ground is frozen, so I'm not concerned about that. Inside of that, the rest is everything else. Now the stove comes in a couple of key components, and the first component I'll show you is this base. So this base does two things, or I guess you might say even three things. First off, it acts as the fire grate. So this is the actual fire grate. It's not as a part of the rest of the stove. It is a part of the base. On the bottom is what you would call the ash pan. So it's an integrated piece. Plus it gives me a storage for the rest of the stove and a wide, stable platform to put it on. Yeah, I'm definitely going to have to find another place for this before we have our lunch. Now there's another envelope, and inside of that envelope is the stove itself and a few other pieces. So I'll bring this out, and here's the first thing I want to show you. Those are the couple of the pot supports or trivets, is how much this looks like the Bushcraft Essentials XL. In fact, it's almost virtually the same size, and it folds up exactly like the Bushcraft Essentials XL does. Now, before we get too far into this, I do want to say this. When the stove arrived, these hinges weren't all operating the way, freely. A couple of the hinges kept grabbing. I'd have to manipulate them a little bit. But since I've had 10, 12 fires in here, as you can see, I'm getting dirty just opening it up, even though I have cleaned it. It is working much better. So I just point that out. If you get one and the hinges aren't quite as operable as you feel they should be, they'll probably loosen up over time or get a little smoother over time. So I want to show you this to start with. 4 feet on the bottom. They're not for setting on the ground. They're for sliding into 4 slots on this bait plate. These 2 larger slots will accept the bottom of the hinges here. So let me just show you how that works. Drop them down the side, both sides. Now, it attaches securely to the base plate, and the stove is ready for functional use right now as it is. However, there are a few more things that came with the stove. To start with, there is this grill, which I'm going to be using today to do a little bit of sausage roasting on it, or grilling, I guess, and 4 pot supports, trivets, whatever you want to call them. So there's a few features about these that I want to show with you before we get to building the fire, so let's just start. Number 1. Let me show you the basic way to use them, I guess, which is on top. So there are slots on the top of the stove on both sides, and they match up with the slots on each of the pot stands. So you can set them wide apart, like this, or if you want to bring them in closer, you can do that as well. So that's the top of the stove. On the side of the stove are 2 slots on both sides. That would allow you to slide them through, rest them in the other slots for an alcohol stove. And let me show you how that operates now. So I'm going to slide it through the back using the top slot. Through. There we go. Through here. Come on, you can do this. There we go. Okay. Now, they're spaced apart perfectly for use with a Trangia. Now, I didn't bring a Trangia out with me today, but I have tested this with a Trangia to make sure it does work. The alcohol stove I did bring out is also from Boundless Voyage. It's a small double wall alcohol stove made of titanium. I did purchase this myself, and it will set inside, as you can see, on those 2 slides, or the slots, or the pot rests as they go through. One thing I will point out, and it's probably easier to point out with it outside of the stove, is when they're setting on it, they tend to rock. And this is true of the Trangia a little bit because of these crenellations up here. Now, those crenellations are intended to give you air on top of the stove when it's on like this, but when they're inside the stove as a pot support, the alcohol tends to rock a little bit. It's not going to fall out, but it will rock around a little bit, and that might be unnerving for some people. All right, let me just take these out, because there's one other feature I want to show you. So I'll put the gaps using the Trangia in this. I'll put that information in the video description. Suffice it to say that when it's on the pot supports are through the top slots, it is about 3/4 of an inch, or just a little bit more than 3/4 of an inch below the pot. So a good height pot gap between the top of the stove, or the top of the stove and bottom of the pot, I guess we'll say. All right, one more feature that you can use these for, and I have done this as out of necessity as much as anything, because I had to move the stove while it was burning, is you can take the 2 pot supports and slide them in like this, pick the stove up and move it if you have to while it's burning. Like I said, I have done that, so I know that it works quite well. All right, those are all the features, except maybe for the grill on top. There are 6 little projections that will line up with notches on top. I will tell you now, it's a little easier said than done when the stove gets going. But there, that's the way it will line up. I'll talk more about that because I actually am going to do some grilling in a few moments' time. Last thing I'll mention before we get to building a fire in this is wide open feed port on the side. Just fine. Very much exactly like the Bushcraft Essentials Bushbox XL in that manner. All right, now let's get a fire going so I can get some lunch on. I have my stove set up on relatively level ground, and that is one thing I've noticed, is that, because of the wide base, you got to find somewhere level for it. It's just a little bit harder as a result. There, that looks pretty good. It does make it very stable. It's not going to tip over on you. Maybe just a little harder to find level because of it. My 2 fire grates. Now, I'm going to do things a little different this way today, just to be different. One is to show you a little bit of what I can do. This is a piece of string coated in wax, kind of like a wick. Well, it is a wick. And I'm going to use it to light the fire. I have a little mixture of, I can show it to you. It's fat wood, shavings, things like that. I'm just going to put them in on the bottom. And we'll put those aside. Picked a couple pieces of birch bark up off of the ground here. Put that on top. This is way more than anything I need. Let me get my sleeves out of the way here. I'm going to put in some very small spruce twigs, very dry, very snappy, and I'm putting them in vertically. And they say, Mark, you haven't got the fire lit yet. Why are you loading the stove up? I'm going to light it from underneath in a very unique way. And the way I'm going to do, and part of the reason why, by the way, is I can put these 2 pot supports on before we even get the fire going. A lot harder to do it afterwards. Okay, get my wick. So, because the fire grate as is the base, or the base is the fire grate as well as the ash pan, there's a gap of about 3/4 of an inch or so that I can actually light this, put it under, the flame will go up, ignite the fire starter from below, and it's all done. There you go. I can't see it in the daylight. There we go. That's going now. So I'll just slide that in and light it from underneath. A little different, right? Give it a second to make sure it's catching. Hard to see if there's any flame down there. And it's going. All right, it should catch. There we go. I think we're catching now. Now, it's going to take a second, obviously, for you to see anything moving up, but first thing you'll see is an increase in the amount of smoke as anything down there catches. All right, I think we actually may have caught on. Here we go. And now I can pull the wick out and save that for another time as that slowly catches on. Now, we're just going to let the fire build up very quickly. Now, I loaded spruce twigs, dry spruce twigs, for a reason. They have their own built-in accelerant, the resins that are in the wood itself. It'll burn real fast. That, along with the birch bark, will burn really fast, but also very smoky as well. But it's a good way to get a fire going to start with. And let me see. I have also some splits of maple and splits of oak here that'll eventually throw on, especially when I get to the grilling part. But I just wanted to create a good hot fire for you to see that. And now, I'm still throwing them in from the top, or trying to anyway. There we go. And in a minute or so, I'll be pushing my sticks in from the opening on the side. But yeah, all right, now you can see that. Now, part of the reason for me doing this is to see what happens when I put a full pot of ice cold water on top of that, right from the stream, not far from here. A couple things happen. I gotta need a glove for that. Boy, is that ever building up in a hurry, the flames, that is. I could do this. When you put a pot of cold water on top of a stove like this, it dampens down the temperature of the stove. So it lowers the combustion temperature some. So it's a challenge to see how much dampening it does. If you see a lot of smoke, you have a lot of dampening going on. Now, mind you, a lot of the smoke is from the wood itself because it's so resinous. But what I wanted to see is how much exhaust room I have around the pot. Now, that's a 14 centimeter diameter pot, so it's a good sized pot. Takes up most of the stove, but there's still plenty of room around the outside for the exhaust and flames to come up. And I'm putting my glove back on. So all I'm doing right now is I'm going to bring some water to a boil for my lunch. And in this case, a couple of eggs. It'll take a few minutes for them to boil up, harden up. Put the lid back on. And obviously I'll have to throw pieces of wood in every once in a while. That's a roaring fire. Look at that. Of course, the wind is coming directly into the feed port right now, so that's really accelerating the flames as well. So not bad. As far as how much dampening took place from the pot, it's actually not bad at all. There's lots of exhaust room around the outside. All right, that other side of using the softwood is it burns down quickly, so I'm already in a position where I can throw in a couple of pieces of maple. They will have an extended burn, lots of heat, less smoke. Okay, so my eggs are on. Once they're hard boiled, I'll remove the two pot supports. I'll get that grill on and I'll grill up a sausage. My eggs are hard boiled. They're cooling off to the side here. I had some pieces of maple and oak inside. They have died down considerably. There's still a little active flame, but there's lots of good coals. So I'm going to put the grill plate on to grill a piece of sausage that I have here. I've used it a couple times already, as you can see. I'm going to put the clean side up. There is a tiny bit of a warp in the plate that's worth seeing as well. Nothing significant. We'll talk about warping in a minute because it's actually quite surprising. There, that dropped in. Okay. Sometimes not quite. And this is where you need to have gloves if you're really... There, that's in now. And something to maneuver it around a little bit. I'll open up this sausage as that heats up. All right. And I think that's probably going to stick a little. But there we go. Okay. It'll take a few moments for that sausage to get... I mean, it's cooked. It's Polish sausage is what it is, by the way. And once I start to get some charring and browning on both sides, I'll know it's done because, like I said, it is cooked and I'll have to let it cook through. Just warm up more than anything else. And then I'm going to enjoy my lunch, and after I finish that, we'll wrap this video up. All right, a few closing thoughts for the Boundless Voyage titanium folding wood stove sent to me by Temu. So this stove has been on my list for a long time, something that I wanted to try out and then eventually bring a review to you. So I'm thankful for Temu for sending this out to me. One of the best parts of the stove, of course, is the cost. This is quite inexpensive for a titanium wood stove. I think it's still under $100 on Temu. The link will be, of course, in the video description as well. But the reason I wanted to test it out, besides the fact that it had been suggested to me by viewers, is that it looks so much like the Bushcraft Essentials Bush Box XL. Now, I'm not going to call it a clone because it's not. There are some significant differences. But what is similar is not only the size of this, but the way the sides fold in on itself. It just collapses down very small, as you saw when I took it out of its package earlier. And it has a lot of other similar features. What's different about it, of course, is the base plate, which is not only a support for the whole stove, but it's also the fire grate and the ash pan all integrated. Done, I'm sure, to just reduce manufacturing costs, because otherwise, the more hinged things you have to put into a stove, the more expensive it gets in the manufacturing phases. So how did it perform? Well, you saw this thing can build a really hot fire really fast. So how's it been doing endurance-wise? I've had at least a dozen fires in it over the winter, or the period of time I've been testing it, January, February, March, whatever it is now, and it has not warped the stove at all. Having said that, the base has, strangely enough. I don't know if you can see, there's a little bit of a warp down in here, but that hasn't made any difference whatsoever to the setup and performance of the stove. The top of the stove folds just as flat now as it does when I first got it. Actually, I'm kind of impressed because my experience is stoves warp. They pretty much all do. It doesn't matter what they're made from, they tend to warp. The stove body itself, has not warped. Only the base plate, which is strange enough. Yeah, this is a high-value stove for sure at under $100, I believe it still will be. Then, if you see one and you're wondering if it's a good value, yeah, it actually is a good value. Okay, I just want to close this video up with a couple more comments to say that I'm thankful for Temu for sending this stove to me. I'm going to be putting the links to where you can purchase this stove on Temu, and I believe by the time this video goes out that they will have given me a discount code for purchase of the stove. If they have, that'll be in the video description as well. I would invite you, if you have any comments or questions regarding the Boundless Voyage folding titanium wood stove, put those in the comments section. I will put all the other information in the video description. All right, until next time, get out and explore and take that path less traveled, because it will make all the difference. Bye for now.